All right. If we're talking music on the show, you know that Jeff helped book the guest because I'm not the best. But this one I knew, and I was kind of excited about it. We've got singer, songwriter, musician, record producer, television and film composer J.R. Richards joining the show today. J.R., how are you today, man?
I'm good, you guys. Thanks for having me on the show.
So normally Jeff throws a guest out here who's from the music world, and I'm like, who? Because I'm the sports guy, and that's like all I know. But
Right.
I knew your stuff, and I was excited. He's like, you want to have him? I'm like, yeah, definitely. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
you've got this new album coming out. It's your 10th. Does it ever get old that you're releasing again?
There are some days where it feels like it's getting old. There's some days where it feels like I'm getting old. Actually, be maybe more accurate. No, but really, I clearly it's something I'll be doing to the day I die. I just I enjoy sitting on that piano or grabbing one of these guitars back here, and too much to ever stop.
Does the process change? Does it get easier or does it get harder?
Yeah, that's a good question. It hasn't. I mean, the process has kind of changed just because as I get older, the dynamics a little bit different. When I started with Dishwalla, it was four young kids, going to college, and no responsibility all the time in the world, and no real pressure in life except to just go have a good time and write some songs and record them. And obviously that's changed. I mean, I'm a father. My wife and I, we have four boys together. um, I'm almost 60, I'm not in Dishwalla anymore. I'm a solo artist. So the dynamic has changed quite a bit, but it's still enjoyable. And in terms of the process of writing songs, that really hasn't changed. It's just kind of is what it is. I don't have any kind of formula. So, things just happen as they happen.
How is it different now, the process for you from being in a band to being a solo artist and being the lead man of your own effort?
Yeah, there are pros and cons to it. I mean, being in a band is nice just because there's always the same group of guys that you play and perform with, and so you definitely get a synergy. And I think that um, but then being by myself, it's I don't have any of that. However, I get to make all the choices. I am much more of a control freak. I wrote a majority of the songs for Dishwalla, so I don't have to be as diplomatic when working on songs, and therefore sometimes the songs don't go necessarily the way that I had envisioned them. So pros and cons. But I love playing with those guys. They're all amazing musicians, and it's just a joy to play with. So there's I do miss that.
The new album is My Darkest Hour. How did you come up with the title? And I see in the background, we can see you,
Yeah.
the eye that is the album cover. How did you
Oh,
come
that's
up
right.
with that?
Right there,
Yeah.
yeah. That's my wife Min painted the album cover, and that was her initial sketch. It's pretty phenomenal that she drew this. Like breaking things behind me for how real it looks.
It is amazing because when you look at the album cover, what you're showing us is black and white, but
Yeah,
the album cover is darker and has more color to it, and it does almost look like a photography of a real eye.
yeah, it does have that like hyper realism thing about it. She and then in that particular post, she hadn't added. You can see the reflection of me in her eye. That's her eye, and so because she has this dark green eyes, and as you can see in the album cover when it's in color. And there was the reason that I call it My Darkest Hour is because there was a point where my wife was dealing with cancer. It was during COVID. I was dropping her off, and I wasn't allowed to go into the hospital with her, and so we were just having that both acknowledging that this could be the last time we actually looked into each other's eyes. So that's what that picture represents. Luckily,
How
things turned around, but it was pretty dark there for a moment.
how hard is it as an artist when you basically spill your soul into a song and then it becomes a hit and you have to keep performing it and reliving that moment in time?
Yeah, I mean, some of the songs I've written have pretty emotional reasons for writing them. Some of them are just more colors, emotional colors. Those are easier. Occasionally, one will sneak up on me, in a performance, but and kind of take me by surprise. But for the most part, it's performing is a little bit like acting, in that when you're out on the stage and you're playing for people, you are kind of playing this character that is clearly a part of who you are, but it's not you in kind of normal land. So therefore, yeah, it's a little easier to play some of these heavy songs and get through it and move on to the next thing.
So the album that's out now, the first single. I feel old by saying that. What I asked you before, like, what's the first single on the album? Do people do singles anymore? Do you pick a song that's going to be the first one, the single, or do you now just release the album because of the way that music is sold and distributed?
Yeah, I mean, you don't. A single traditionally was all about radio, right? And that it was about, that's how you got people's attention, was getting one song on radio. So you would pick what you thought was the most accessible song on the album, and that would be your first single, in hopes that people would call in and request it, and then want to go to the shop and buy it on a tape, a CD, vinyl, whatever. Obviously that's changed dramatically. So yeah, the idea of having a single is really morphed into something. It could be many different things, because I'll release an album, but then I'll just I'll spend maybe a month pushing one song. Like, all of my posts on social media are about that one song, and so that's kind of the single of the month. And you can do that for a year if you've got 12 songs.
In this era, or as somebody who likes to control how they do things and has a pride in what they do, is this a better era of music for you and other artists, in being able to control the narrative, control what songs you want to put out, when you want to put them out, the songs that you ultimately want on an album, as opposed to what a record company may want for you to do?
Yes, that's a really good question. I am grateful that I'm at this point in my career and at this time in the world, just because if it were the 90s and I was in my 50s trying to do something on my own, I would have to rely upon a label to promote me and distribute me worldwide, because pre-digital distribution and internet, there was no way to reach out to anyone without a big label's infrastructure and distribution network, and so that you had to be signed to a major label if you wanted to keep that going. And so I'd be dead in the water if this were 1995. I would have nowhere to go. I mean, except for where I could, get a show ad, or talk somebody into putting my album up on their counter at a CD shop. So, the way things are these days has completely changed the game for someone like me, so that I can continue to, stay in touch with people and release things on a worldwide scale.
You talk about distribution now. I'm curious, what's it like when something hits? I mean, did you have a sense when Counting Blue Cars came out that it was going to be what it was, that 30 years later, you're still going to have people talking to you about this song?
No, I didn't think that at all. I mean, when I wrote it initially, I wrote it quicker than most songs I write, and thought it was a cool song, but never thought of it as a single. Thought other songs that had written, that the band had, were more, would make more sense being a single. And then people at the label, when we got signed, said, we want this to be one of the singles, and I was surprised. And the first single we had was a song called Haze that just did nothing. Sadly, it's a good song, but it just didn't connect, and so they pulled it quickly, and then they went with Counting Blue Cars, and then that just blew up through the roof. It's crazy.
You to us and to a bunch of generations, not just one. Your music is the soundtrack on so many things that people have watched and seen. Like, when you go through the number of TV shows and movies and TV shows without music, there's something lacking. If you were to just strip that from any movie or TV show, the emotion of it wouldn't be the same. So, what's it like to know that people who have watched shows like Smallville, who've watched One Tree Hill, who have you are, by the way, are on an album Jason and I often talk about, Empire Records, is considered this great You
Love
know, it's an amazing
Brilliant
compilation of
movie.
songs.
Yeah.
brilliant.
What's it like to be part of so many generations who watch shows and think of your music as part of their experience?
Yeah, it's kind of mind blowing. Especially when you lay it out in that way, because I don't really think about it too much. Because like a movie like Empire Records, I think is such an iconic capturing a moment in time, perfectly done. I forget that we even have a song in that. That was just pure luck that even happened, and so it is kind of weird that we're a part of that in some
Uh-huh.
small way. Same with American Pie. We have a song on American Pie, the very first one that was a fluke as well, and just blew up massively. So
Yeah, you're the soundtrack to so many different parts of my life, whether it's movies I watched or even when we were getting ready for this interview, Criminal Minds is on replay and the
yeah.
intro song is coming on and I'm like, "Oh, we got the guy who was involved with that." Like that's just cool to us. Could you ever have imagined that that's where your path would take you?
No, no. I mean, I'm just, I grew up in a small town in California. I wasn't, just I've always been writing songs. I've been writing songs since I was 9.
It's in the family though, right? Like your father
Yeah.
and your grandfather were songwriters. So unfortunately my kids have no chance because I can barely write my name. But you have this legacy that you stepped into and then blew up even bigger, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, my dad was always fancied himself a rock star, but he was a mathematician and Ivy League, went to Stanford, brilliant guy, but with an incredibly cool voice and could write great songs, and but just never had the same opportunity. I mean, I just happened to be at the right place at the right time, doing the same thing that they did, and so there's just a lot of, I don't know if you call it luck or what, but just the way the stars aligned. It's hard. I mean, I saw a lot of records from other bands on major labels that had recorded some of the best music you've ever heard that nobody's ever heard, because for some reason somebody decided to drop the band, or they never released the record, or somebody got hired and fired, and the politics of it all. And it's heartbreaking, because there was so much great music that sadly will never be heard. These days it's a little different because anybody can release something, so there's a little more of a chance. There just happens to be a lot more noise, so it's hard to be heard through that.
Well, you've done a great job with that, and you're still doing it after, as you said, after all this time. Um, what's next? You have the album that's released in My Darkest Hour.
Yeah.
Um, are you going to tour, and where do you go from here? Because it's not just the U.S. The music is known, and when I remember meeting you in New Jersey a few months ago, and you were on your way, I think, to the Philippines after that.
Yeah, so I was there for 2 or 3 weeks, I guess, playing all the provinces there. Dishwalla, and then even since then, my own solo stuff has done really well there. And yeah, I mean, crazy. So so much of it has to do with those TV shows and movies you guys mentioned, because a lot of these markets were difficult to get into, and we weren't. I was never touring and trying to break the Philippines. We just happened to end up having a few hits in the Philippines. And next month I go to South America. Same thing, and it's because of TV shows like Smallville or Charmed or American Pie. I mean, that's why there's a fan base down there.
You talk about the fan base. Talk about the fans. What's it like to have people connect so much with stories that you've been able to tell?
Uh, yeah, I mean, it's it's always pretty powerful. I mean, I get a lot of messages from a lot of people that are listening to a song, and it's kind of at a critical point in their life, both positive and negative, and that people will take the time to let me know how much that means to them, or how much it impacted their life. And geez, which is hard, because I really feel I absolutely have to answer every single one of these people, me. And so I spend a lot of time responding to all of these incredible stories that people will send my way, which is mind blowing. I mean, the whole thing is just crazy. But I know the power of music. I mean, music has saved my life many times over, probably, and so I can appreciate how powerful music can be to someone. So it's just respecting that.
When you go out on stage, do you feel like it's almost like an outer body experience? You seem like such a humble person. Is it hard to get up on a stage with thousands of people, or is that something that comes naturally once you walk out there and the curtain rises?
It's easier to play to more people than it is to play to a small room. It becomes
Interesting.
more personal when it's a small space with just a few people. And I'm going to be doing some bigger shows, like these shows in the Philippines, South America. Those are bigger, full rock shows. But I'm also, since COVID, been doing this thing where I go and I play solo in people's living rooms, and that was how I kind of kept the lights on during COVID, was playing, because all the venues were closed, was playing all these small places. But I have to say, the a lot of times it can be 3, 4 people in the room and just me, and that's hard. So um, yeah, that I've getting it's way out of my comfort zone. So I'm getting much more used to that. I'm so used to walking out on a big stage, and so you just kind of slip into I'm just used to it, into that character that you are in that moment, and just have fun. But yeah, playing in these small venues or just literally somebody's living room, that was has been a challenge, and I get really nervous.
I'm surprised. A little surprised that you say that, because I did see you in a small venue. There were probably 40 to 50 people there, and you seemed comfortable. By the way, you doing those songs stripped down is absolutely incredible, and your album Stripped is incredible.
Oh,
But
thanks so much, my
but
man.
but the way you were opening up before each song seemed natural to me.
Yeah, well, I've gotten better. I was a little stiff, at the
Lots of
beginning.
practice.
A little, yeah. I mean, I just realized you really have to treat it as a different way of doing it. I mean, the things that I was probably telling stories about, the songs or things that are going on in my life in that moment, is something you would never do in front of 1,000+ people, or even 500+ people. It's just too hard to connect with people in that way. But in a small, more 50-person environment, you can really make it special and different by talking about your life and the song's life and why the songs are there, whatever. And then you play the song, and I think people connect with it even further, and so it becomes its own unique, special thing.
So when we interview athletes, particularly minor league players, we always ask them their stories from the road. Normally it's a long bus ride, or any great tour stories that are just like, you can't believe this happened, or it sticks out, or it's so fun.
Yes, there's a lot. Most are probably a bit R-rated, sadly. Um, I mean, nothing too untoward, but or anything like that. Just silliness. But yeah, gosh, we've we've traveled quite a bit. I mean, we've had everything from the bus being on fire, and the bus driver trying to put out the fire and running out of fire extinguisher and deciding that he was urinate on the fire because that's all he's got, to landing on aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf, because that's where we were performing, and becoming tail hookers on an aircraft carrier, um, which is
Well,
crazy.
that's comforting to know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what? We had a really early 2000s, when we were in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we had an opportunity to do a tour with USO, and then it went into MWR, which is kind of the more, if people don't know, that's like USO is more Army kind of oriented, and MWR is more Marines and Navy kind of thing. And it's their entertainment wing. And, they'll fly comedians and singers and artists and all kinds of stuff, actors, everything, all over the world. And so we were performing in countries and places that you would never have any access to. Submarine bases off the coast of Greece, that are like secret, just stuff like that. It was amazing, and it was a really, really cool experience, and a tremendous amount of stories there. Landing on an aircraft carrier is absolutely insane. It is the coolest thing, but it's It's absolutely mad.
Kind of
I,
still
I, I,
scary.
yeah, it's not something that I want to encounter at this
I don't
point in
even
my
like
life.
I don't even like landing on the runway at the airport.
Well, we've got a couple guys in the band that are absolutely terrified of flying. So I'll give you one story here. So we're in Rota, Spain. We just played in Spain, and then we go to this local NATO air base, and we're going to get onto a C2, which is basically it's the only propeller-driven plane that will land on an aircraft carrier, and they use it to ferry like VIPs on and off and equipment and things like that when the carrier is pretty far off. And we were flying from Rota, Spain to the Theodore Roosevelt, which was stationed off the coast of North Africa because there'd just been some sort of terrorist activity, and so they were flying sorties and stuff off the ship. And we're there on the runway, putting all of our gear on, and they're showing us, all the harnesses and the helmet and everything. And one of the crewmen is explaining to us that, look, okay, this is going to be a bit crazy because we're going to fly out. It's going to take us about an hour to get to the ship. We're going to fly real low. And then once we get to the ship, because they're flying sorties right now, we have to, because our plane is slower, we need to get in, and so we don't interrupt the flight pattern of all these F-18s going on and off the ship. We're going to come in full speed right over the carrier, and then we do this thing called a delta turn to bleed off speed. And it's a real, like 2-3G turn or whatever, where they bleed off speed and they do a full 360 and then boom, land on the carrier. And then they pull us out of the way, and that way the next F-18 can come in. So the guys who are doing our sound on the ship, because we were playing inside the belly of the ship, were both Spanish, the Spanish sound crew. They didn't speak any English. So they didn't get any of that. So, because the crewman says, look, you sit backwards in the plane, so it's more for survivability in case you hit the ship when you land, I guess. And he said, you need to brace yourself. You have this 5-part harness. You got to push your feet up, your knees up against the seat in front of you, tuck your chin in. And when we catch what they call the wire, the plane's going to stop really fast, and all the blood's going to rush one direction. So try to tighten all of your muscles, your stomach, and everything to hold as much blood forward as possible, as you don't pass out. And when we go in, right before we go into that delta turn, we're going to stand up at the end of the plane where the little gangplank is, and it's loud. There's no windows. We're going to stand up and just scream and wave our hands so to get into brace position, because the plane's going to go into a 3G turn and we're going to hit that deck. These guys had no idea that was going to happen. All they knew is that we were flying. It's hot, and it's loud, but everything's cool. And all of a sudden the plane lifts up in the air, and then 2 of the crewmen stand up and start screaming. And then the plane goes into this crazy bank turn. So immediately one of the guys starts vomiting all over the place. And as we're coming in, we land, and poor guys were having a heart attack. They thought we were crashing. Of course, they didn't realize that was actually just how you do it, apparently. And anyway, we landed. I'll never forget, because one of the guitar tech behind me, he didn't know that was going on. He stands up and he's like, "Smells like curry."
Oh my!
As we get off the plane. But I remember when we caught that wire, my vision just became tunnel vision for a second. I almost passed out the first time catching the wire.
When Jason asked the question about stories from the road, I believe you also have a story, if you feel like telling it, you don't have to, about crossing the Canadian border.
Oh, yeah. Right. Well, that's happened a few times. So we were on our way to play in Toronto, and whenever you're on a bus crossing the border, whether any band is smart enough to know that if you smoke pot or whatever, you don't carry drugs across the border, because you're more than likely to be searched, because you're a band. They kind of assume, obviously, you're a bunch of idiots and you're probably high as kites. So if anybody's doing anything bad, they always get rid of it. But anyway, so we're crossing the border. We're as legal as you could possibly be. And for some reason, when they pull us over, they stop us, and then they take a dog around. And the dog, for some reason, was hitting on the bus. There's clearly some narcotics on the bus. And so immediately we're like, what? What are we talking about? There's nothing. And they sent us into secondary inspection, took us all off the bus, and they take us into this room, and they separate everyone, and they're interrogating everybody individually. Where are the drugs? Because they get the dog on the bus and they cannot find anything. Dogs hitting on everything, but they can't find anything. They start taking the bus apart with power tools, like taking the wheels off, taking the paneling off, taking the roof paneling off. And they're running everything through these huge, X-ray machines. They can't find anything. And so they're interrogating us. I mean, Canadians are so polite, but it's like, okay, where the drugs at, eh? It's like, there are no drugs. Test my blood. You will find no drugs. You'll find plenty of caffeine, and that's it. And then I had to be strip searched. I'm sitting there with a guy with an whatever AR-15 going, can you bend over, and the whole thing. And then he wanted me to sign his CD, but anyway, but they never found anything. Finally, we get back on the bus, and it turns out that the bus that we were leasing had just been purchased by the bus company, and it was Snoop Dogg's bus prior. So
you understood everything at that point.
It's just in the bus. There's just nothing you can do about it. And so, of course, the dog was just going completely crazy because it was just a huge, massive Bob Marley joint as far as it was concerned.
Have you ever had a chance to ask or thank Snoop Dogg for that moment in time?
Not personally, no. And I don't know if he's ever had trouble going across himself, but his bus does.
So we've taken a lot of your time. Tell us what you want people to take. We all interpret music differently. What do you want people to take from My Darkest Hour, that album? And I know it's hard because it's like children. You don't want to pick your favorite. What are your favorite songs off that album?
Oh, well, I actually had a poll on. I have a Patreon page, so I had all my Patreon followers, folks. I had them all take a poll just to see what songs were connecting with them, and I told them just pick your top 3. But to start it off, I had to pick my own top 3. So I chose number 1 was a song called "My Darkest Hour," the title track. Song number 2 is a song called "Lost Ever Since," and song number 3 was a song called "When Will We Mend." So those are my 3 faves.
What do you want us to get as we encourage people to go pick up the album? Is there something, a message, a story you want us to take away that you intended as you wrote this?
Well, I mean, I obviously I hope people enjoy listening to it. I songs for me are very cathartic in that something happens, good or bad, I write about it in a song, and usually I try not to just have a story that doesn't have an ending. I usually, even if it's something kind of dark, I usually try to have some light at the end of the tunnel. And especially the past 5 years, it's been a challenge for so many people, myself included. So, for me, it was just kind of latching on to those moments of hope that, we'll get through this, whatever it might be. And, so I hope if anybody's going through anything like that, that they hear those kind of moments of hope and hopefully can latch onto it as well.
Is that the theme that you want people to take away? That this album is about hope through difficult times? Did you did you think about that as you were like when you said I want to put together an album and this is what I want it to be about?
Well, every time I always try to think about what I want to do, it never turns out that way. So I've stopped doing that long ago. I just kind of follow, how things end up, and there was a deeper point you just asked me, and I don't think I answered that.
Just what the question is did you have an idea of what you wanted as a theme for this album, and do you feel like you've accomplished that?
Not necessarily. I guess I didn't really have an idea of what the theme would be. The theme just kind of became what it is, and it was definitely dealing with a lot of shitty things going on and trying to figure out how to cope with that, but in a positive, healthy way, that there's a way through this, but also always acknowledging the challenges that we might be going through, and that they are difficult, and yeah, I mean, it's weird how when you make a record, for me, they always tend to take a life on of their own, and I feel a bit more like a spectator to it all.
Well, the 10th album is My Darkest Hour. We hope that you enjoy watching as a spectator, as everybody can start to enjoy this as much as they have the soundtracks to their life that you've helped create. J.R. Richards, thank you so much for the time. We wish you continued best of luck and have a great tour.
Awesome. Jason, Jeff, you guys, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.